Costume designer James Acheson began his career on BBC television, where he dressed Doctor Who. And he worked with Terry Gilliam and the Pythons on Time Bandits and The Meaning of Life. Following his work on Brazil, Acheson went on to win 3 Academy Awards for The Last Emperor, Dangerous Liaisons, and Restoration. For the hyper-reality and fantasy of Brazil, Acheson looked for inspiration from the surrealists to designers of military hardware.
The influences were everything from Schiaparelli through to, the latest developments in personal detection. Strange catalogues of protective gear and police badgery and, uniforms. And again, a lot of American influence in the sort of flak jackets and lots of protective bits and pieces. And I guess we were always looking to America, I'm afraid. The nightmare always tended to point us towards America. We would get the tallest guys we could find. I think everybody had to be at least 6'4", and then these huge great coats, grey coats, which had a sort of slightly Prussian feel to them, but they were built over the top of American football padding to make them really big. But it was an idea that didn't work. They were supposed to be these huge, big, grey rectangles with chromium heads. You don't get it on film. On set, they looked enormous. It was a remarkable experience to work with Robert De Niro. He would come on a regular basis to develop the costume. I worked it out that we spent 26 hours in fittings for that one outfit. I think it was more like a kind of cross between a burglar and a ninja warrior. The detailing on the costume was unbelievably elaborate. You see none of it in the dark. We had such exhaustive fittings for that outfit. I've since worked with him again. He hasn't changed, and he's a delight. I love him, don't get me wrong. I mean, he is extraordinary, and it's much more enjoyable the second time round. Sam's winged warrior outfit, it was based on all sorts of things. Pavel Chelychev's paintings, space suits, Icarus, an anatomical suit as well. The anatomy came into it. And I think those were the main influences. We designed a 14-foot wingspan on the back of Jonathan Pryce. So there were transparent feathers on a metal frame. So it was like an angel, but also a man in a flying machine. And he operated it by pulling these handles. Because our wings were made on carbon fiber rods, we had this, when we actually had built them, we discovered we'd got this really very nice sort of whip to them. So our Icarus figure glided, and when he moved his arms, he had this rather beautiful fluid movement that the carbon rods gave us. My favorite shot in Brazil is Jonathan Pryce landing with the wings. Unfortunately, Terry then wanted him to fold his wings up, which was something the wings were never designed to do. The 15-foot-high samurai warrior was a incubo nightmare. It cost a huge amount of money, even by today's standards. It got out of control, and I have to take full responsibility for it. The concept was that it was this huge Japanese suit of armor made of computer parts. It got out of control because we tried to make it out of computer bits. But only on a carefully analyzed still photograph would you get that. And it was then put on dear, much-loved and now departed Winston Dennis, who had a very dodgy foot or ankle or knee or something, so he couldn't really walk in these enormous built-up shoes. and a very heavy costume and a mask and a helmet and a flag rig behind him. And it was very heavy, and Terry got very impatient with it. Sam Lowry. He starts off with a single-breasted, quite narrow, three-piece stripe, darkish grey, and when he changes over and becomes part of the establishment or gets promotion or whatever, he went into this awful, shiny, tootle, double-breasted, broad-shouldered, lighter grey suit, which in retrospect should have been more extreme than it was. I know this sounds strange with my track record, but I'm a great believer in not trying to swamp an actor with an idea. And having said that, you're now going to ask me about his mum. She was wonderfully supportive about what I thought was a kind of fairly crazy thing to do. The idea being is that everybody else in the restaurant would also have rather strange things on their heads that related to the restaurant. And in fact, you don't see any of that. Years later, I remember her saying everybody always asked her about the shoe on her head. I thought she brought it off brilliantly. She just wore it with such style. It's really bizarre, you know, it's one of those things that probably got me the next job.